The Free Speech Podcast is an initiative of SFLC.in under the Free Speech Project to understand the changing landscape of free speech in an internet enabled world. We have spoken to a host of journalists, activists, lawyers, and scholars to understand and rethink our current landscape around free speech in India.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Free Speech Podcast. Today we have Abhinandan Sekhri. Abhinandan is the co founder and CEO of Newslaundry, a digital news platform which has won several awards, including Ramnath Goenka and Red Ink Award. Abhinandan has also co founded a production called Small Screen. He has also worked for TV Today Network and has been the chief scriptwriter for a number of new satire shows. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Hansraj College, Delhi University. Hi and welcome, Abhinandan,
Thank
to
you,
one
Radhika.
of the first pilot episodes of the Free Speech podcast.
Thank you.
My first question to you is that we are seeing how important it has become to protect free speech. On one hand, we have the Nobel Peace Prize for 2021, which was given to journalists, and on the other hand, we have Indian government restricting media members to enter the parliament. What role do you think that journalists have to play in the coming years to shoulder the responsibility for protecting free speech?
I think it's becoming increasingly obvious around the world and in India as well. And I'd say India is amongst one of the worst offenders, as many metrics such as the Freedom of Press Index, the press index has demonstrated over the last few years. So the kind of responsibility on journalists to push back, because we are the first line of defense of free speech. And why we are the first line of defense as news professionals, even though I don't do any journalism myself, but I'm responsible as CEO of an organization which has a lot of journalists doing journalism, um, is that in the digital age, misinformation has been weaponized like never before. And the whole free speech, its importance, its interpretation, its misinterpretation, and its uh, you know and just the kind of stuff that politicians these days say to get votes, which often border on hate speech, and then they want to use a free speech argument while inhibiting journalists from free speech. It's become such a complicated world that journalists have to start spending more and more time, and those in the news industry have to start spending more and more time really thinking through their position on free speech. Because like even I have always been an absolutist on free speech, that it cannot be ifs and buts. Because I mean, like, the American model for me is the model of free speech. That is something that we should aspire to, every country should aspire to. But in the last few years, and that was a clear choice before social media became a thing. Uh, at the same time, I really appreciate Germany's governance. And when I was in Germany, and we had gone as part of a group of journalists, and we were interacting with journalists and lawmakers and MPs, etc. And they spend a lot of money to push freedom of speech and democratic values internationally. All their parties have a certain fund and a budget for it, um, where they hold seminars, they hold workshops. Deutsche Welle, which is funded by the German government but does not transmit in Germany but every other country. The purpose is that yet there, any images or slogans or sign associated with Hitler is a crime. So I found that interesting, and I was thinking, okay, now I like the American model, but I see why they have this here. Now, would so you see, I had to think it through, because now using social media, you can spread hate. Earlier, it was clear, if I'm in a like the cliche that in a crowded room shouting "there's a bomb here" is not free speech, even in America, because you can cause immediate. But now that is shifted online, you can do the same thing without being in a room full of people. So I've had to rethink And I'm doing that even now, and I hope this entire series that you're doing makes us think about and come up with very clear distinctions of the importance of free speech and how it must be protected, while also pushing back at hate speech, and also ensuring that another big injustice like what happened in Germany, or what happened in other parts of the world don't happen, like in when I'd gone to Kigali. In Kigali is the capital of Rwanda. When I'd gone to Rwanda, it is against the law to ask someone, are you Hutu or a Tutsi? Because the history of what that Hutu Tutsi clash had caused there, kind of genocide, you can't ask someone that question. Is that does that interfere with free speech? Would I like it to be illegal in India to ask anyone their caste? I can see an advantage of that, but does that mean it could be misused? So it's become too complicated, Radhika, and I'm hoping that people like you and a conversation like this will solve it.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we started the free speech tracker, which has, several categories of data that we collect, is because we really think that there needs to be a reimagination, if not a complete rethink
Yeah.
of laws around free speech. You can't have a colonial legislation like sedition still there in the same
Yes.
form that it was in the 18th and the 19th century. Right.
Mm.
So, I mean, we recently had the new IT rules, which were introduced very recently, February 2021, which put obligations of self-regulation and governmental oversight on online publishers. Before that, I think there was a Registration of Press and Periodicals Act, but that was only valid for, like print media, like literal newspapers that would come out, even for like a very specific category of that.
Right.
There were also these rules have been subsequently challenged. There are various stays that are happening. I think there is a stay in Bombay High Court.
Mm.
SFLC also moved on the basis of the free software community. I
Mm.
think we moved to and that also I think has a stay right now. It is being claimed that these rules are important, like it's the government's view that these rules are important to hold online publishers accountable for the content that they publish. However, it is being contended that these rules will create a chilling effect and are being termed as detrimental to democracy itself. One of the challenges that various organizations have put forward is this. Can you how do you see that these rules impact working of online journalism, especially smaller media houses?
So they are deeply flawed and problematic at many levels. One, at the basic, how do you plan to execute some of the clauses that they have? I mean, they're unexecutable. Some of them are bypassing existing legal remedies, and I don't see any court allowing that to happen. For example, there is one provision which allows someone who is a party that has been affected or disturbed by some article that a news organization carries can report it to the self-regulating body that within the organization. Then you're part of whatever organization that you are, the larger organization, the second level. And the third level is the interministerial committee. That So one of the things there is also defamation. Now, if they're going to decide on defamation, all these defamation cases in the High Court, which I'm also fighting, so what are they going to? Are a bunch of, I don't know, directors or joint secretaries going to overrule a High Court judge? There's a clear contradiction there. Now, which court will say, yeah, that's okay? And I've just given you one. And then the other big problem at a very macro level is that they have thrown news and OTTs and the social media platform in one basket. They're very different things. You see, the social media platforms don't have editorial filters. News organizations do. Newslaundry has a managing editor who has 3 decades experience as a journalist. We have 3 executive editors. We have a desk editor. So when a reporter files a report and it goes all the way up to publishing, it's fine going through 2 or 3 levels of filters. So, and that is not the same as Twitter or YouTube comment section or Facebook. So there is absolutely no sense in which rule is designed for what platform, what is the reason for its existence, what is the purpose it is supposed to serve. And that is because and this is my view, and I have articulated this on various discussions around the IT rules. And a lot of very well-meaning journalists and anchors have had conversations around this. But the problem is that the conversations start from the assumption that the rules are being done in good faith. These errors are there because they were drafted in a hurry. We can tweak these errors. They have not been done in good faith. The purpose of the rules is not to limit fake news. The purpose of the rules is not regulation, it is control, which is why they're so badly drafted that four high courts, or not four, at least three high courts have given an order in some way or the other, either staying them or halting them or giving no course of action. There was an order yesterday as well. I think it was the Madras High Court.
That's second. Even the JPC report that's about to come out, the Joint Parliament Committee on Data Protection. I think what one of the suggestions in that report has is to make social media platforms as publishers of content, and they're going to have like smaller organizations have that compliance burden of data protection. I mean, again, all of these are still rumors because nobody has the actual copy except the committee members. But this is just going to add so much compliance burden,
Oh,
and it'll make it very difficult to function.
and we haven't even got to the practical aspect of the compliance as required by the IT rules right now, which have been stayed for news organizations at least, because the clause that has been stayed by default, that stays all the other clauses, because if you don't have that body, then what are you going to be reporting to the website and uploading? uh, so so now for a small news organization, and we are in a stage of the digital media, digital platforms mushrooming. The broadcast model has demonstrated that it's broken. So news is evolving, and news is very important for democracies to thrive and survive. So one would assume that there will be regulations to make sure that the news ecosystem remains robust, healthy, because it's called the fourth pillar of democracy for a reason. But the opposite is happening here. For a small organization, it is very difficult to follow these regulations, and it is very easy for bad actors to just inundate and flood someone with complaints, and getting people of the stature that they want for the second tier self-regulatory bodies, is not an easy task. And also recognizing those, digipub is still struggling to get recognized, although we have like the most digital organizations in the country. So the assumption that this is in good faith is a flawed assumption, which is why we don't move to any sensible regulation, because sensible regulations are the outcome of interactions, of conversations, of ideations with people who are doing it in good faith. And because that's not the case, regulation is seldom sensible, practical, or realistic.
They've also, I think, exceeded their legislative mandate by these rules because under the IT Act, you just cannot do this, and that's been a major challenge in
Right.
most courts. Yeah. So normally, when we think of speech restricting laws, we think of criminal laws like sedition or UAPA or criminal defamation. But there are civil laws also which restricts free speech, not in the way that we're going to put you in jail, but maybe in a way that we're going to fine you so much that you won't be able to function. How do
Right.
you feel that laws like copyright infringement, civil defamation are also used to silence journalists who do not conform to the mainstream perspective? You'll see extreme amounts which are claimed as damages. Do you think these are the new tactics, or like I mean, with we saw the recent India Today News Laundry, defamation case. So do you think that these tactics are again being used to towards journalists?
So because the case is being heard in court, the suit is being heard, I will not comment on the specific India Today News Laundry one, but we've had three in the last few years, Sakal, Times. Um, now, it's an interesting space one is in, because media critique is a relatively new thing in India. I mean, it's been happening in other parts for a long time, more, robust democracies, more mature democracies. A media critique is a new thing here. So there is no like existing case laws or any precedents to go by on media reporting on media. So that is something one would really have to see how it emerges, how it evolves. Whether there's new legislations put in place. I mean, there was a Copyright Amendment Act. There was amendment to the Copyright Act in 2012. When it kind of from just print and book reviews, it went into criticism on the Cinematography Act. Sorry, 2012 was amended. So earlier, what was you could use excerpts of book reviews or etc. to critique, or that was extended onto content that was not just printed but also cinematography, sound, video, etc. But using defamation is something that I think has been done even before media was commenting on media, although now it's become a little more frequent because media is everywhere. How it I mean, I still do believe that there is enough in law where truth has defense is is a defense that's enough. And we are confident about that. As a news organization, you can imagine not everybody goes to court, but a lot more people send you legal threats, saying that we will go to court. Of course, only 10% actually end up going to court, but everyone tries their luck by threatening you. And in most cases, we send a very polite email back saying that, we're happy to meet you in court because truth as defense. Now, and the same is true for critique, criticism, etc. But if there's a fact that's wrong, one can apologize and retract it, as many news organizations do. But the problem, so I honestly, personally don't believe that there is a problem, because I think you have to give someone, any citizen, the right to protect their reputations or the assaults. For example, I think, the young lady who's a film star, who was hounded and demonized by the news channels when Sushant Singh Rajput died, Riya Chakravarti. Uh, I do believe she has a very good case for defamation. The kind of stuff that news channels ran about her was outrageous. And I think they should be held accountable. So I don't think one should, because the way I've understood it, because we have been, going to court for various cases on this whole defamation, I think there is enough in law to defend truth as defense. What we are saying is not untrue, and we can show you why. But someone has to have that latitude. Now, when it becomes a slap suit, what is often called, I mean, I honestly don't have a solution for it other than shaming them. People who do it, people who do slap suits should be shamed. Um, but I think that is an inevitable loophole in having a provision for people like Ria to defend herself. There will be people who will misuse it. Uh, and that for me is not reason enough to water down defamation. And also, people can ask for outrageous sums. I mean, also, you would know, but I don't know how many of your viewers would, that depending on various high courts in the country, if you're demanding 100 crore damages, you have to deposit whatever 10% of that. In some places there is that 10%. In some places there's a cap at 3 lakh. So no matter what you demand, you only have to deposit that amount, or pledge that. So it really depends. So I think if someone wants to do so, and I find it highly unlikely anyone's going to be given those kind of damages. There was a very famous case many years ago on ITC versus Sohail Seth. I think they had like demanded some 80, 100 crores from him. I mean, it's highly unlikely these kind of sums are ever going to be given. But because the legal costs in our country are so high, and unless you can afford it, it's a tough one. But like I said, I don't know what the right balance should be, but there has
Yeah.
to be a provision for people like Ria to hold some of these
Yeah.
fake news vile broadcasters to account.
True, correct. I completely agree with you on that. This is one question that we've been asking all of our guests is, do you think, I mean, and you also already answered it in a way, but, if you want to add to it, do you think right to free speech should be absolute and not have reasonable restrictions? Like it's in the US. Do you think reasonable
Yeah,
restrictions
like
should be
I
there?
started off by saying, I have rethunk my position on this ever since digital media and social media, well, not digital, but when social media became a thing. Because even in the US, like I said, standing up in a crowded theater and saying there's a bomb here is not free speech. It's a crime because you have caused or likely to cause a stampede, which can lead to immediate harm, hurt, death, damage. So that is very simple logic. Anything that is not immediately, I'm not telling people go beat up that person or go run over so and so. If there's not an instruction for immediate harm to anyone, it is covered by free speech. And my position was very clear. But with social media, that auditorium now is a bigger space. So now if someone tweets, you know, how dare, the dog whistles that people often use. Uh, I don't know, I'm rethinking my position now. And I'm not opposed to, I mean, I'm opposed to hate speech ideologically, but legally, I don't think, because then anything can be hate speech. Any criticism of any, you know, group, organization can be considered hate speech. Um, you know, um, like the other day, we were talking in a group, and there's a Hindi ka muhavra, I don't know whether it's English, that, the picnic basket isn't even out and the ants are here. हिंदी में बोलते हैं मतलब अभी शहद की बोतल खुली नहीं मक्खियां आ गई. So I was talking and I used this proverb in the context of the paparazzi coming to the hate paparazzi whenever there's an, I said before the event happens, posts will be done by these hate. So someone said that could be dehumanizing, like Deemak, like Amit Shah said Deemak. I was like, yeah, you could, but it's a proverb. I haven't made, So, so, so I think because calling anything hate speech can lead to its widespread mass misuse. But anything that clearly is going to cause hurt, harm to a community, to a group of people, and it need not be as direct as go beat that person up, or let's assemble at such and such colony and beat up anyone who's coming here to pray. It can be subliminal. It can be Aurangzeb se badla lena hai, Jayachand banna hai ki Maharana Pratap. You could say anything, which, so I'm actually rethinking it because now it has become more and more complicated. And I do believe in America, it is being rethunk. And I have seen conversations around this on debates, which it was very clear in America. Is rethunk a word? I've used it 3 times already. Uh, but I mean, I'm just thinking that it's becoming like after the 9th of January or 6th of January, whenever that thing happened, when Trump supporters went and stormed the Capitol. There are conversations happening, and I've seen those. Even in the country where there was freedom of speech was absolute, it was the final frontier of what it should look like. That what should someone be allowed to put out there if it can lead to this? Was that tweet or was that line of his an instruction for violence at the Capitol? Was that Trump Jr.'s speech, was this line a clear incitement to the crowd? It's becoming gray because people have started using nuance to ask for violence. So I think it'll like I said, conversations like this will have to evolve a new parameter of what is an ideal freedom of speech regulation.
Only the course of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're hoping. We actually spoke to somebody who's doing research in, I think, University of Sydney on hate speech, and he had very interesting insights. Hopefully, I'll be
Okay.
able to share it once it's published. It was quite an interesting conversation. things that even I hadn't thought about. But we'll definitely share that with you when we publish
Please,
it.
I'd very curious to know.
Thank you, Abhinandan, for taking out the time to do this. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
I did, Radhika.
uh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.